What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte, and we are back for our final playoff preview here for the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. Once again, for the second consecutive year, we have the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers, both winning their matchups from last year as well, between Carolina and Florida being the conference finals this year and last year, and the Dallas Stars and the Edmonton Oilers. We saw the same result in the conference finals, leading us here today, which is going to be our cup final between the Panthers and the Oilers. This is a really good matchup for a whole bunch of reasons. Both of these teams met last year. If you guys remember, in the handshake line at the end of last year's playoffs, Kachuk actually said to McDavid, best of luck, we'll see you again next year. Well, obviously there was a little bit of thought there, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, these are really the best teams in the National Hockey League right now. And, as much as maybe last series I wanted it to be Carolina-Dallas just to see something different, the reality is these are the best teams in the league, and their stars are shining and shining bright. And that's why, we'll break down who I think is going to win this series, and we're going to break down how many games, as well as who I think is going to win the Conn Smythe. There's a lot of factors involved in all of that, but it's the people going into the postseason. If the Florida Panthers were to win the Stanley Cup, these players would have to perform. If the Edmonton Oilers were to perform and go on another deep playoff run to the Cup final, these players would need to produce. They've all done that. And I think what we've seen is really, I think the most interesting story for this is not the fact that Barkov's playing well, or Bobrovsky's playing well, or McDavid and Draisaitl are playing well. It was a matter of how was the Oilers' goaltending going to hold up, and how is the Oilers' depth going to do? And with Evander Kane coming back in the lineup, how is that going to affect things? And for the Oilers, it's worked well. And I think that the one criticism you could say is the goaltending. Stuart Skinner is very Jekyll and Hyde. He'll give up 6 or 7 goals in a game, but there's also games where he has shutouts, multiple shutouts in a series. So the way things have kind of gone with the Oilers, it's been, you're not having Skinner stealing games, but he's doing the job he has to do. And I think with the Panthers, there's a little bit less of that, like they're just blowing games up and losing 6-0. You have not seen that from the Panthers yet in the playoffs. So off of just that is something that is in favor of the Panthers. The Panthers also played some really tough teams in the postseason. I would say Tampa, who looked like a formidable foe, completely collapsed under the Panthers. The Leafs, I wouldn't say collapsed. Some would argue they did, up to nothing in that series, but the Panthers beat a really good Leafs team. Carolina was killing it through the first 2 rounds. They meet Florida. They get killed themselves. Pretty swift kicking in the butt for the Hurricanes. For the Oilers, we almost didn't see them get past the first round. They almost lost to the Kings in the first round. There was a lot of skepticism about whether they would get through that first round. And then everything with Dallas, they did pretty well and definitely seem to be getting better as the playoffs has gone along. I would say the most improvement between the two teams from the beginning of the playoffs to the end is in favor of the Oilers. I think the way they've improved throughout the postseason has really helped them out, and I definitely think is in their favor. With that said, the big storyline for these two teams, the puck-moving ability of the Oilers has improved tremendously between last year and this year. And for the Panthers, I would say their offense has gotten a lot better from last year to this year. So both teams have developed and kind of completed themselves, and it's a little bit of a different storyline than it's been since last year when these teams met, right? Like, it was the dynamic duo of the Oilers and that offense. For the Panthers, it was all about defense, right? So that's not necessarily the story this year. And I think, considering the attention in Edmonton, the amount of pressure on the Oilers is definitely there. But I think, unlike some other teams up there north of the border, I think the Oilers are able to handle it, and handle it quite well. And I don't think that's the reason they're going to lose this series if they lose the series. But I think that at this point, we could talk about power play, penalty kill. Like, at this point in the playoffs, you don't get to the Stanley Cup final if you don't have a good power play, if you don't have a decent penalty kill. You don't get this far. So we're not really going to delve too much into that. I think, all things considered, offense, I think, is in favor of the Oilers still. Especially with injuries like, Kachuk is still a little bit hurt. So I don't know how much that's going to play a factor, but between McDavid and Draisaitl, everything else is great there for the Oilers if it's moving, but those are the two biggest guys on this machine for the Oilers, without a doubt, and that's how it's always been. So the offense, we're going to give to the Oilers, but slightly. At this point, the margins are so small, but when you have McDavid and Draisaitl on the same team, that's what we're talking about the differences. For the defense, I think it is still in favor of the Panthers. I think as much as they lost between last year and this year, and I think the Oilers have really closed the gap between last year and this year. I think maybe a slight change, to the Panthers defense. I think Seth Jones has come in there and been a really good fit. Thank God they made that move because I think that really has helped them. It's going to really help them in this series. And as good as the Oilers defense has gotten, especially with Matthias Ekholm back and healthy and playing, that's great. But again, I still think it slightly favors the Panthers. And then that leads to goaltending. And it completely depends on the night. Completely depends on the night because I could sit here and say, I said it in the last series. I thought Ottinger, goalie for goalie, is a better goalie than Skinner. But you know what? When it came to actually getting the wins and getting it done, Stuart Skinner was the better goalie and was able to do a better job. So that kind of gets thrown out the window. And then you kind of look at it from the other side. For the Panthers, Sergei Bobrovsky has been steady Eddie the last couple of years. So with that, I think it still slightly favors Florida. If I had to pick a goalie to play in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final for me, I would still pick Bobrovsky over Skinner. And I think most people would agree with that. So that means offense, Oilers, defense, Panthers, very, very slightly. I think a lot of you might have a little bit of controversy for that one. And then goaltending, I would still go Florida. As close as the margins are on any given night, I would still go with the Panthers. And with the fact that the teams that the Panthers have gone through, their track record looks slightly better than Edmonton, as good as Edmonton was, there was a couple of scary moments. Again, you could say the same thing for the Panthers. They were down 2-0, but I think it was more controlled. When they were down 2-0 in that series against the Leafs, it was controlled. So I'm not really that worried about that. Even for the Oilers, when they were down in that series against the Kings, it was fairly controlled. It didn't seem like it got out of hand, and obviously they were able to climb back and win the series. So, my final prediction, let me know what you guys think down below, is your prediction for this Stanley Cup Final. I am going to still go with the Florida Panthers. Shout out to Luis, big member here on the channel. And I think Luis's team goes back-to-back. I think the Panthers win their second consecutive Stanley Cup. I think the margins are so slim here. And I think that when you're looking at this series altogether, these are two incredibly talented teams. The Florida Panthers, with everything they have coming back, the Oilers, with some of the new additions they have, this is going to be an incredible Stanley Cup Final. And I am so excited for every second of it. And I feel like we got robbed in the conference finals because both of those series only went 5 games. So I've been off the last couple of days from work, and I haven't been able to watch any hockey because all those series are already wrapped up. But in terms of Conn Smythe, I think the 2 picks for each team, it's kind of easy. I would say for the Oilers, if they win the Stanley Cup, I'm going to go with McDavid and Draisaitl. I don't think there's much debate about that. For the Panthers, similar story, but slightly different when you got Bobrovsky in there. I think it's going to be Bobrovsky and Alexander Barkov for the Florida Panthers. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Who do you think will win the Conn Smythe? Who do you think will win this series? How many games? I'm going with the Panthers winning this series in 7 games. I think these two teams are just way too close, and I'm really hoping for that 7-game series because I feel like we've been robbed of that through this playoffs of a lot of Game 7s. So we'll see what happens here. But let me know what you guys think down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time.